Parents of Reddit, when did you realize your kid was stupid? Not just simple-minded but downright stupid. And how did you feel about that? Realizing that your kid is dumb is actually pretty terrible. I have 3 kids. The first 2 were incredibly bright, walking early, talking early, the oldest was reading early. We weren't looking for signs of struggling with our third. I guess we had our guard down. He only started walking at 15 months, but we kept in mind that our other kids walked very early, 6 to 8 months, and didn't let it bother us. Looking back, his communication skills as a baby were pretty clumsy. His siblings all seemed to play with language, gibbering and trying out different sounds, but he would do very steady, consistent bursts. But again, a baby, you try not to let yourself put your kids into pigeonholes, especially not that early. Because he was the youngest, it was hard to spot at first that he'd lean on his older siblings to let them think for him. When he was struggling with a task, they would simply take over and complete it for him. The first time the thought occurred to me that something was actually wrong was when he hit 9 years old. We had gotten a new microwave. It was very basic, but a completely new setup. I noticed that he wasn't eating popcorn anymore. I asked why. He said he couldn't figure it out. So I sat with him in front of the microwave. He stared at the buttons. Instead of trying to figure out the functions in this microwave, he was just trying to recreate the button layout of the previous microwave. As though the buttons had just been scrambled or something. He kept looking for a specific button. It didn't help when I told him it wasn't there. He only started using the microwave again once he could memorize the steps. He wasn't trying to understand the steps. Still, I thought this was just him learning to rely on his older siblings' problem solving. Why learn to learn if you never had to? I asked the most helpful of our kids to take a step back, and she did, but it didn't improve. Problems with his video games, homework, chores, it didn't matter. Once he hit a wall, he stopped, or would attempt fruitlessly to fix it, then stop. Show him a pattern enough times, he can mimic it. But he's not going to solve it for himself, almost certainly. He's an incredibly kind, generous, and, thankfully, good-looking young man. Not being intelligent is not the worst thing, but it does make me worry about his ability to function independently. We pay far more attention to his friends than his older siblings, knowing how their critical thinking is going to become his new life patterns. I'm pinning my hopes on him finding a trustworthy life partner who has his best intentions at heart. Either that, or hopefully our oldest 2 will continue to keep an eye out for him. I watched my 18-month-old son pour water into a bucket, tip the bucket of water over his head, cry because he got wet, pour more water in the bucket, tip the bucket of water over his head again, and cry because he got wet again. Then, to get the water off his face, he started slapping himself. He was repeating his experiment to see if he got the same results. You've got a scientist in the making. My son came up to me while I was eating flaming hot Cheetos and asked for some, then cried because I wouldn't share. So I gave him one, then he cried because it was hot. So I got him a drink and he calmed down, then cried because I wouldn't give him more Cheetos. So I gave him another, and he cried. He ate my entire bag. The whole fucking thing. With tears rolling down his face. Okay, this is sort of the reverse, but I have to vent. My mom was convinced my brother was learning disabled because he was struggling in school. He couldn't copy things off the blackboard, got headaches a lot, would get sick to his stomach and have to go lie down in the nurse's office a lot from the stress. The school district didn't think there was a problem because he could read at grade level. She took him to an independent place to be tested, and they said, oh yeah, he clearly has some sort of disability, but we can't tell what kind without lots more expensive tests. She didn't have the money, so she just pulled him out to homeschool him in 8th grade. Fast forward to when he was 19, still hadn't gotten his GED, couldn't drive, and just played video games all day. Living out in the country, totally isolated, never been on a date. My husband and I took him in, because we couldn't stand to see it, and because there was an adult learning center in our town that he could get to via the bus. About a week after he moved in, my husband noticed the kid squinting when he played video games. He swore his eyesight was fine. We had him tested anyway. He was nearsighted as fuck. My mom, well, he said his vision was fine. My brother got his GED in less than a year. He tested in the 90th percentile nationwide and is considered college ready by his teachers. We're still working on his confidence, because he was told his whole life that he was learning disabled. My mom's not a bad person and is well-meaning in general, but dear God, it is hard to forgive her. I wanted to raise my kid right, so I moved into an Asian neighborhood and bought in a house with Asians everywhere. She's about to turn 11 months, and she's still not a doctor. Parents often don't notice. I knew there was something not right with my little brother when he was about 6 months old. I tried to get my mom to get him checked, but she didn't. Took my mom 4 years to realize. Turns out he has autism. I have 4 children. The 3 younger ones were asking me what their names would have been if they were born the opposite sex. My oldest child looked extremely puzzled. He was probably around 12 at the time. Finally he said, "How do you know?" He was legitimately baffled. My daughter then says, "Duh, she named us. What do you think? You came out and your belly button said, 'This is Jake.'" I could tell so many more stories like this. More. When he was about 8 years old, they had grandparents' day at school, so my mom went to hang out with him. They were very close and had spent tons of time together. His teacher says, "And who is this Jake?" He looks at my mom and says, "What are you, my aunt or something?" Please do tell more stories like this. A few weeks ago we were on our way home from a sporting event, and we had 3 of his friends with us. They wanted to stop at McDonald's, okay fine. So they're all in line and I'm kinda hanging back deciding if I'm hungry enough to ingest McDonald's. I see Jake ask one friend something. The friend shakes his head and then Jake asks the next kid who shakes his head no, etc. He then comes over and stands next to me with a really sad look on his face. I say, "What's the matter?" He says, "I don't have any money and no one has any that I can borrow." I know some of you are going to say he's being manipulative to get me to pay for him. After almost 18 years with this child, I can tell you that he truly didn't even consider that of course his own mother would buy his supper. He sees every situation at complete face value and can't work out that there may be other options. I got to watch a couple of parents, my neighbors, realize their kid is stupid. Like any parents, they had gone on and on about how their kid, 18 months old at the time of this, is so above average. He couldn't walk, couldn't say a single word, nothing beyond this horrific shrieking noise, couldn't communicate. No surprise given his parents. I'd bet my eyes there's not a single book in their house. My friend came over with his 16-month-old, who walked up to them and introduced himself, then went and unzipped the cooler, got dog treats and fed the dogs, and then got his own food out of a Tupperware container and fed himself. You'd think these neighbors were looking at an alien or something. They were in such disbelief. They'd never bragged about their kids since. When it was time for my daughter, 5 years, to go to kindergarten, I realized she wasn't hitting all of her milestones. So, I consulted a teacher and decided to put her into pre-K. I also started trying to get her assessed to see if something was wrong. It was just little things like not using scissors yet, things like that. There were huge obstacles just to get someone to look at her to tell me if there was anything wrong with my kid. At 7 years old she finally got diagnosed with a neurodegenerative disease. Her body doesn't metabolize cholesterol, which is gathering in her brain and killing it. Right now she has trouble walking, speaking and doing other things. Soon, probably within the next 2 years, she will start seizures and she will turn into a vegetable then pass away. The nickname of the disease is childhood Alzheimer's. She has no idea she's different from any other kid. She's totally awesome. I'm just glad I get to know and love her for as long as I can. A girl in my class admitted to trying to charge her phone via microwave recently. She said she thought the radiation would charge it. She is 24. Her parents have to know she's a moron. My son is not the brightest. When did I realize? There wasn't a big aha moment. It was more along the lines of, "Are you kidding me? You don't understand this?" Happening over and over. Had tons of testing done. He is low IQ. Not mentally retarded. Just slower than the average person. As a teenager, if he was in a movie, he would be a lovable dumb jock. Oh, I don't know if this is gonna help, but I'm a dumbass, and I tried college and hated it. If he likes working with his hands, send him in trades right away and not lose time like myself. At the very end, like credits about to roll, of watching Frozen for the second time, my 12-year-old son shouts, "I get it now!" It took 2 viewings of a freaking Disney movie for a 12-year-old to understand the overly explained plot twist. Let him watch Inception. Probably just lock up his brain. The thing is, He really thinks he's smart enough for this kind of stuff. He loves to read nonfiction and watch very adult shows. He just has the comprehension of a rock. Sometimes I'll try to give him an out because I see him getting bored, but he rarely takes it. Then he'll say, "That was pretty good," in a real smug voice so that it seems like he understood, but he won't continue the conversation. Classic. Covering up my dumb move. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.